It's time for another episode of Survivor China, and previously, both tribes learned they would both go to their own tribal councils to vote someone out, meaning individual immunity necklaces were up for grabs for both tribes. With the players having to hold their breath underwater, it was Sarah and Roland who won immunity on their tribes. With Shu needing to go to tribal council first, the majority alliance of 7 initially wanted to split the votes, but Alec pushed for all 7 to plant their votes on Ebony as he wanted to avoid any possible flip scenarios. With Ebony doing her best to convince Julian and Jeannie to flip, she also wanted Steph in on the plan, but getting her into a chat was nearly impossible. After finally having a last-minute meeting with the swing votes, Tribal Council didn't see the flip go through, and Ebony was voted out with 7 votes. As for Feng, Maria and Roland made it their mission to link up their own trios and form a 6-person group. However, Daniela was hesitant to get rid of one of her numbers in Shelby or Kevin. After much convincing, Daniela finally gave in and the new alliance voted out Kevin, blindsiding him out of the game. Then, the 16 players had to go through a tribe swap, and with 2 new tribes of 8, which players will be on the top of their tribe, and which ones will drop to rock bottom. We'll find out soon. It's currently noon, day 10 of the game, and the new Feng tribe is at camp, getting to know each other. Adam tells everyone he's a model, and apart from that, he doesn't really have any interesting facts about himself. Hannah then tells everyone she's currently a full-time student, and she too doesn't have much to say about herself. Annalise then asks Hannah what she's studying, and Hannah says she's studying science. Annalise smiles and says she herself is a researcher for the environment. She asks if perhaps she wants to be in a similar field when she's older, but Hannah says she's more of a physics girly. In confessional, Hannah says she literally panicked when she stepped foot onto a tribe full of snakes, and then she had heart palpitations when Annalise questioned about what she was studying in school. Obviously she's not studying physics. She's a law student, but she doesn't need to tell anyone this. It just got very overwhelming when Annalise thought they could really connect on the topic of science because she herself doesn't give enough of a shit to hold a conversation about it. Jeannie then tells Adam and Hannah she hopes they don't feel overwhelmed by the amount of snakes here, and Hannah says she can sense a lot of cobras and vipers based on the energy they all give off. They all laugh about it, and in confessional, Betty says she finally gets to meet more interesting people. She already loves Hannah and she also doesn't mind Adam either. This is perfect that she feels positive about them because she is on a mission, and that mission is to take out Annalise. That woman has an idol or some type of advantage in her pocket, and it needs to go. Preferably, she needs to go before it gets used. Betty then comments how Adam and Hannah missed out on some crazy stuff the last 2 days, bringing up the topic of Annalise's idol. Annalise giggles and plays along with this mystery, saying that she can't reveal her secrets. Adam then asks if this is a joke, but everyone says no. Annalise says she won't speak until her lawyer shows up, and unfortunately for all of them, nobody here is her lawyer, so they'll have to wait until after the season finishes. In confessional, Annalise says she's 100% down to play with these people through her imaginary idol. They are all still very paranoid about it, and thankfully they believe the idol is real. It would be nice if she could craft a fake idol, but she doesn't want to pick up a random rock and claim it's an item of protection. She'll just have to hope the lie will last long enough for her to reach the merge. On the Shu tribe, the 8 members are at camp, and Sarah welcomes them all to their new home. Maria says she can already sense cleaner air here. For whatever reason, their old camp stunk half the time. Shelby comments it was likely frog poop since a lot of frogs live next to them. Maria then asks Sarah, Garth, and Julian to introduce themselves, and Sarah says she's a social worker from New York. And yes, she's a lesbian if they couldn't tell by her style. In confessional, Sarah says she has something very embarrassing to confess. Since day 1, she saw this one girl on the Phoenix tribe and they always stood out to her as cute. Sarah then covers her face and says it was Maria. She can't help herself. She finds Maria attractive, but she'll tread lightly because at the end of the day, she isn't from her original tribe. She doesn't know the secrets from that Phoenix tribe. Back with the tribe, Garth says he's the oldest one on the season, age 59. He's a window washer, mainly contracted for apartment buildings. Julian then says he's both an author and digital artist. Daniela comments that all three of them are quite different in their jobs and personalities, which could be great additions to a tribe. In confessional, Daniela says that first impressions matter a lot in this game, and she could tell Sarah is a social butterfly. The girl brought out her personality on display, while Garth and Julian were much simpler in their introductions. She'll just keep a mental note of that going forward. Maria then says she's a hairdresser, so if anyone needs their hair done, they know to come to her. Roland then says he's a brewmaster, and Julian immediately cuts him off and asks what a brewmaster is. Roland laughs, and Julian apologizes if that's a weird question. Roland says he gets this question often. The answer is basically in its name. He specializes in brewery and basically ensures everything in the brewing process is correct. Shelby then jokes that he also knows how to masterfully brew hearts, and she winks at Maria. Garth, Sarah, and Julian look confused, and Sarah admits she doesn't get the joke. Shelby then clarifies that Maria and Roland seem like a very cute couple, and she'll leave it at that. Maria awkwardly laughs, and in confessional, Maria admits she didn't think Shelby would just lay it all thick. They just met these three new people for the first time, and the first thing Shelby wants to do is expose her closeness to Roland. In another confessional, Sarah covers her face, claiming over and over again that she doesn't mind Maria being with Roland. Not at all. Never. They'd make a cute couple. For sure. Roland and Maria would make a cute couple. Back on the Fung tribe, Alec and Steph chat alone, and Alec admits this swap ended up pretty swell for them. Steph agrees and says she pretty much feels good about Betty and Jeannie still. Maybe they can also work with Hannah or Adam because they seem pretty chill. Alec admits he saw Hannah and Adam as more of a package deal, rather than individuals. Steph admits she could see that being the case. Especially since they admitted their tribe voted unanimously last vote. In confessional, Steph says she took the time today to evaluate how she plans to move forward, and right now, she's keeping everyone at a safe distance. She's playing her own game at the end of the day, and she doesn't want anyone to manipulate her individual decisions. Hannah and Adam seem like great people, so she definitely wants to get to know them better. The only person she can't see herself working with is Annalise because she would most definitely tank her other allies' games. Meanwhile, Betty and Hannah chat alone, getting to know each other's tribes more. Hannah admits to Betty there wasn't too much bad blood from her own tribe, but nobody fully knew where they stood because their tribe's dynamics have been super messy since the start. It was just blindside after blindside. Betty breathes out and says it sounded hectic for them. Her own tribe was more methodical and straightforward. Hannah then asks her if there were alliances, and Betty admits Annalise, Rachel, and Ebony were on the outs last night, and they voted out Ebony because of the rumored idol in Annalise's pocket. Hannah squints and asks why Annalise didn't play it, and Betty says that people assumed she was cocky and selfish and decided to keep it for herself. She probably felt safe at tribal. In confessional, Betty says she's slowly but surely trying to get into some sort of working alliance with Hannah. She likes her vibe and thinks they can truly connect on a game level. She wants to be the first snake to have an impact on Hannah, so Hannah will always pick her over any other snake. Betty then admits to Hannah she wants to have a lot more chats with her moving forward because she feels like they get along. Hannah agrees and says there's always that vibe you get when you feel good about someone, and Betty is that someone to her. Betty laughs and says her vibe detector is on point. At camp, Adam, Rachel, Annalise, and Jeannie chat, and Adam asks Rachel when he truly knew he would become an emergency operator. Rachel says he knew from a very young age actually. His mom was a nurse and his dad was a police officer. He initially wanted to mimic his dad and become a cop, but he eventually decided he'd be better off on a phone while saving lives. Jeannie says she honestly has so much respect for people like him because their jobs are tough as nails. In confessional, Rachel admits his mom passed away a few years ago to cancer, and she had a huge impact on the world as a nurse. He always knew he would want to become a hero himself when he was younger, and his mom always pushed him to reach that goal. His dad wasn't too much of a fan of his aspirations because he was very protective of him. His dad preferred him to be something less heavy and intense. Of course, coming out here and meeting Ebony really reminded him of home. He's still processing her elimination last night. It sucks how things went. Obviously, better her than him, but it's possible she was voted out over Annalise because of the fake idol situation. Either way, he didn't want to be disloyal and rat Annalise out. He's still going to try to work with her, but obviously with some distance. On Shu, David chats with Daniela at the well, asking her what their next game plan is. Daniela says there's no need to make any more major flips. She has a headache after the 2 flips they made on Anna and Kevin recently. She also doesn't see a reason to flip on anyone from their crew. David admits he feels safe with Roland because of how connected he is to Maria, and Maria is obviously in their trio. He also doesn't mind Shelby, but she's obviously the biggest wild card of their alliance. Daniela admits she's not worried, though. Especially compared to the 3 snakes. The one she feels like they need to keep an eye out on is Sarah because she seems very likable and social. She seems like she isn't trying to be a leader, but is also actively playing this game to get herself through with her social connections. In confessional, Daniela says that Sarah is clearly a social threat. Although she's very sweet, this is Survivor where you need to take out your competition. Unless Sarah has a compelling pitch as to why she would be better to keep around, she feels like Sarah should be the first to go on this tribe. David then says the only reason he would keep Sarah around is because she feels more approachable than Garth and Julian. He'd rather hold communication with her than with the other 2. Daniela admits she gets pretty basic vibes from Garth and Julian, so it wouldn't be the worst idea if they take one of those 2 out before Sarah. They'll still have time to think about it. After some time, raindrops start falling from the sky, and Roland and Maria hide under a tree. Maria sighs and says she wishes they could just run back to the tents now. The water is still dripping through the tree. Both of them huddle by the tree trunk, and they listen to the water droplets all around them. Roland then says he wants to ask a curious question. Maria tells him to go ahead, and he asks if she actually has some sort of interest in him or if it's not at that level for her. Maria quietly laughs and doesn't say anything in response for a bit. Roland tells her she doesn't need to answer right now if she doesn't feel ready. Maria then says she's letting herself naturally navigate through life. Hopefully that answers his question. Roland smiles and says that's enough for him. He then side hugs her as they watch the rain together. It's day 11 now, and on Feng, Jeannie sits by a pond alone and she looks up at the sky in silence. In confessional, Jeannie admits the swap is taking a toll on her emotions. She and Julian were tight at the hip, and now they are divided on 2 different tribes. It sucks because she would always have chats with him in the morning, but she doesn't feel like she can do that with anyone on this new tribe. He's irreplaceable to her. Luckily, she still has some motivation with the idol in her pocket. Not only that, she's also still in a majority alliance that seems to be solid right now. She's just more worried about Julian's safety since him, Sarah, and Garth are the only original Shu members on that new Shu tribe. Meanwhile at camp, Adam, Hannah, Rachel, and Betty are awake, and Adam asks Betty what happened to her hand. He just noticed it's wrapped up. Betty then says she actually injured her hand before the game even started. She literally prepared herself an apple the day before they started, and she accidentally and stupidly cut herself. Hannah says it must have hurt, and Betty says it didn't hurt enough for her to leave China. In confessional, Adam admits that Betty is a huge personality. There's always something new to learn about her. He learned 50 different facts about her in a matter of 24 hours. Nobody had a personality like hers on his original Feng tribe, so this is quite the experience for him. Annalise then gets out of her tent, and she stretches in her bathing suit before heading out for a bath. Betty then rolls her eyes, commenting how annoyed she is by Annalise. She's like a cousin that lives in your house, constantly causing issues and eating all the food. Hannah gasps, asking if Annalise actually eats too much food out here, and Rachel cuts in and says no. Betty admits that part isn't true, but that's how annoyed she is at her. In confessional, Rachel says he really doesn't get the hatred for Annalise. In fact, a lot of people from his original tribe just don't like her on a personal level. He's not the type to leave people out, but it's obviously hard when they are all playing a game. If he makes it clear he's associated to her, he's going to get himself voted out. At the same time though, he can't just sit and watch silently as people like Betty berate her. Later on, Steph finds Jeannie alone, so she joins in and asks how she's doing. Jeannie says she's alright. She misses home. And of course, Julian. In confessional, Steph says that she and Jeannie are in a bit of an interesting position together because they were technically swing votes on the original Shu tribe. They ended up agreeing with Julian that it would be best to stick with the numbers they already had, but they also seem to agree that they need to start making moves for their own games, rather than being told who to vote each time. Steph then brings up to Jeannie how she feels like they both want to make moves for their own games. At the moment, they've only been hanging on to that majority alliance since day one. Jeannie says she feels like they need to be more individual because currently, they don't have anything they can claim as interesting to a jury. Their pre-merge games are going to be trash. Steph says she knows, and she almost wonders if it's even smart to stay Shu strong or not. Jeannie says she personally sees herself working with both Adam and Hannah. They seem very cool to her. Heck, she'd even work with Rachel because they also get along, especially in the last few days. Steph then says they could always make a move against Betty or Alec. Those two are under the impression they are all still strong in the alliance. In confessional, Jeannie says she actually wouldn't be opposed to making a big move against Alec and Betty. She needs to shift her game in a better light that isn't just relying on a majority alliance since day one. Jeannie then tells Steph she personally would like to go after Betty first between the two, but she can also see why keeping Alec would be dangerous since Betty is too crazy to manipulate anyone. Steph says she can actually see it benefiting them if they vote out Alec first, but obviously Betty would be a safer move in order to convince Adam and Hannah to work with them. They probably think Betty is annoying and insane. Jeannie then tells Steph they will definitely talk more about this topic because they seem to be getting somewhere. Adam then chats alone with Hannah, asking her if she has anything interesting from the past day and a half. Hannah shares she built something with Betty so far, so that's something they can explore. Betty actually admitted that Annalise and Rachel were on the bottom before, and they probably still are. Adam says he's pretty shocked Rachel is on the bottom. He seems like a well-rounded guy, though perhaps this means he's not that strategic in the game. Hannah then says she wouldn't be opposed to side with Betty's crew because she really believes they would be loyal to the two of them. Adam agrees, and in confessional, Adam says he loves the moments where he looks back at his past actions and he's super proud of himself. Building this strong relationship with Hannah may have just saved him from getting swap screwed. Since Hannah has a close thing with Betty now, that also means he is also pretty safe on this tribe now. He doesn't mind if Annalise goes home first from this tribe, at least it's not him. On Shu, the tribe hangs out at camp, and Shelby shows off her pageant walks. She then stares at David and slowly approaches him. She lifts her heel onto the bench, right next to him, and everyone screams and laughs. David reminds Shelby they are both married, and Shelby breaks character and laughs to herself. Sarah then comments out loud how cracked this tribe is. She wishes she was on Feng all this time because they had to have been able to keep this level of crackery on that tribe. Later on, Julian and Sarah walk together, and Sarah tells Julian she feels a bit worried about their position right now. She's not getting any indication that old Feng is flipping. Julian says he literally got nothing from anyone. In confessional, Sarah says that she still feels closely connected to Julian in this game, and thankfully they are on a tribe together now. However, they aren't in any sort of majority. The actual majority lies in original Feng, and they probably want to take out a snake because there's too many of them in this game. Sarah then says she wouldn't consider voting out Garth unless it's a last-ditch effort. She feels like she could find a way in with Maria and Roland, but that's about it. Julian says it's hard because they don't know the inner workings of that tribe, so they don't know who is calling the shots and who is dead meat. Sarah says she thinks Daniela and David are a duo. Perhaps Shelby is their third. And then Roland and Maria seem like they would be spare numbers for that alliance. It's just a guess though. In confessional, Julian says he's super thankful he didn't come onto this tribe alone. He can grieve with Sarah. Grieving aside, they need to really step up their games and find their way into the majority alliance. There has to be a way. Otherwise, they will be sitting ducks, awaiting to get shot off of their barrel. Later in the day, Julian chats with Maria, letting her know straight up that himself and Sarah have been discussing possibly working with her and Roland. They just really like them from first impressions and the past 24 hours of chats. Maria says she's interested in what they could do together. She asks if they want to keep it a 4 or if they planned on including anyone else, and Julian says he's good with the 4. Him and Sarah are just unsure how the dynamics were on Feng. Maria says they were all pretty chill with one another, so there's nobody she considers at the top or bottom of anything. In confessional, Maria admits she has to be cautious when speaking with the newcomers because they obviously want to fish for information as much as possible. Julian is one of those people trying to fish for information, but she has to keep up the idea that nobody holds power from old Feng, even though it was technically herself, Daniela, and David all this time. Julian then asks if Feng had chats yet about who they would vote, but Maria says nobody spoke up with any voting ideas. They probably aren't going to until they lose immunity. Julian then says that he'll then meet up with her again after the challenge, whether they win or lose. If they lose, they can chat about voting options at that point. It's now night 11, and while there's still some light outside, Steph and Jeannie walk back towards camp, and in confessional, Steph says she was just walking back to camp with Jeannie, and then suddenly, she spotted a small barrel next to a tree, somewhat hidden from the path. In her head, she thought to keep it a secret for now. She didn't want to tell anyone about anything she found in this game, and so she needed to wait until she was alone to go get it. Half an hour passes, and Steph leaves camp and jogs to the spot she found the barrel at. Once there, she quickly opens it and finds a bracelet with a note. She reads the note out loud, quietly, and it says she found the re-hidden Feng idol. However, the catch is that the idol is actually a bracelet. In order for the idol to work, she must always wear it on her wrist until she uses it. If she ever takes it off, the power of the idol then nullifies and no longer works. In confessional, Steph says she was honestly debating whether it was a good idea to keep this bracelet on her or not. It's an idol, but with a twist to it. If she randomly shows up to camp with a bracelet on, people will notice and question her. She unfortunately can't even hide it through wearing sweaters. She doesn't have any good clothing options and the weather is pretty hot out here. So, she decided she'll just take the risk and put on the bracelet. The note also told her the idol became a bracelet as it's re-hidden on Feng, meaning that is probably going to be the same case on Shu. Nobody used the idol or lost an idol to her knowledge, so someone still has it in the game. She hopes the current idol holder from original Shu doesn't use the idol or doesn't leave with it until merge, or else whoever finds the bracelet on Shu will know about her idol bracelet. It's now day 12 in the game, and both tribes arrive to the challenge mats. Justin welcomes them back for another immunity challenge. He then says that tribal immunity is back up for grabs. For today's challenge, 3 members will start off by throwing horseshoes at pins, attempting to knock them onto the ground. Once all pins are down, 2 other members will gather the pins one at a time and transport them to a bin. Once all pins are in the bin, the last 3 members will crack open the pins for puzzle pieces, where they must work together to solve a jigsaw puzzle on their station. The first tribe to complete their jigsaw puzzle will win immunity, safe from tribal council. The losing tribe will visit tonight to vote the 7th person out of Survivor China. Justin then asks everyone to organize themselves into their groups, so they all communicate for a few minutes. After some time, the groups are finalized, and Justin goes over them. The throwers on Feng are Alec, Rachel, and Annalise. On Shu, it's Daniela, Roland, and Julian. The transporters on Feng are Betty and Adam, while on Shu, it's David and Shelby. Finally, the puzzle makers on Feng are Steph, Jeannie, and Hannah, while on Shu, it's Sarah, Garth, and Maria. Justin then begins the challenge, and the 3 throwers from both tribes begin chucking horseshoes at pins, trying to knock them down. Rachel and Alec get a solid few throws in on Feng, and Julian does exceptionally well so far, knocking down a bunch of his pins already. Annalise struggles to aim at the pins, constantly throwing in between the pins or it lands short. Alec then knocks down his pins first, and Julian follows right after. Both tribes have 2 more people to finish, and Rachel quickly gets all of his pins down, leaving just Annalise for Feng. Alec gives her some tips on how to throw, so she tries and starts getting pins down faster. Meanwhile, Roland and Daniela both have a few more pins each. A minute passes by with all 3 throwing their horseshoes, and Daniela knocks down all of her pins. Roland finishes shortly after, so David and Shelby begin transporting pins for Shu. Annalise has 1 more pin left, and she struggles to knock it down. Alec and Rachel keep encouraging her to not give up, and she continues doing her best. Meanwhile, David sprints back and forth, transporting a lot of the pins for Shu. Eventually, all pins are transported, so the 3 puzzle makers begin opening the pins to get puzzle pieces. Annalise meanwhile finally knocks down her last pin, so Betty and Adam start transporting the pins as quickly as possible, hoping to catch up. Currently, Shu has a great lead over Feng, but the puzzle could decide everything in this challenge. Sarah, Garth, and Maria start attempting the puzzle, and it's mainly Sarah taking over it. Maria tries to help at one point, but Garth tells her to leave it to Sarah. Betty and Adam finally have all of their pins in the bin, so the puzzle makers on Feng finally get to work on the puzzle. As they open their pins for their puzzle pieces, Sarah starts to slow down on the jigsaw for Shu, so she asks for some assistance. Maria then tries fitting some pieces, but claims it's hard because they don't know what it'll even look like. Meanwhile, Feng gets their pieces on their station, so they begin working on the puzzle. All 3 contribute majorly as they get piece after piece. On Shu, Maria says she's struggling, so she lets Sarah try it again. Garth then admits he's no help, so he wishes them luck in this. Meanwhile, Feng makes great progress, and they make a comeback as they only have a few pieces left. After putting in the last piece, the puzzle makers cheer, and Justin confirms the Feng has won immunity, safe from the vote. Sarah then puts her head down, super upset over the loss. Back on the mats, Justin congratulates Feng on making such a great comeback, especially to Steph, Jeannie, and Hannah as they sped through the final puzzle. Hannah then heads up for the immunity statue, and she tells Justin she's so glad she can finally get some safety again. Justin then confirms that someone from Shu will be the 7th voted out. With that, both tribes start making their way to camp, and in confessional, Garth says he was super disappointed in the challenge loss today because himself, Sarah, and Julian are on the bottom. He doesn't want any of them to go home tonight, so he's going to do something he never thought he would do, and that's to lie about the challenge performance of Maria. He will frame it like Maria purposely threw the puzzle, and he'll make her into the villain so that it gives original Shu a chance at survival. Shu arrives back at camp, and Shelby tells everyone they did a wonderful job today. No need to be upset over the loss. Sarah says she knows it's best not to blame anyone, but she feels like she messed up. Sarah then begins to cry, and a bunch of people come over to comfort her. Maria tells her it's not her fault at all. Daniela seconds that and says it's always a group effort. A bit later, Garth and Julian chat alone, and Garth explains to Julian his plan for today. He feels like both of them and Sarah have to stick together as original shoe. Julian nods and says he agrees. Garth then continues to explain his plan. He feels like he'll need to start pushing out Maria's name and claim she purposely threw the challenge. In his head, it would piss off the other Phoenix people because they've been losing challenge after challenge, so hearing that Maria threw would make them all question her. In confessional, Julian says he's not confident whatsoever about this plan Garth has in mind. Maria is very close to her original tribe, so he doesn't see how anyone would believe him. Julian later finds Sarah, filling her in on Garth's idea to get Maria out. Sarah admits she's not a fan, especially because they have better options like Shelby. It's evident to her that Shelby is more of an outcast than they initially thought. In confessional, Sarah says she actually wants to try to work with Maria and Roland and get them to agree to vote out Shelby. However, she's now hearing that Garth wants to get Maria out by claiming she threw the challenge. Now she has to decide whether she should stick to her own plan to get Shelby out, or just let Garth take the fall for trying to get Maria out. If Maria isn't receptive to the Shelby plan, maybe she should vote Maria tonight and hope Garth's plan works. Daniela, David, Maria, and Shelby chat together, and Daniela asks the group what they want to do tonight. Shelby then says she feels like Julian is going to be a huge threat down the line. She can see his under-the-radar gameplay. He has his cute little overalls on and he always has a smile on his face, but he never speaks out with his own thoughts. Maria frowns and says she really started to like him, but she gets it's a game. Daniela then says she personally thinks that same exact reason, but for Sarah. In confessional, Daniela says she identified Sarah as her biggest threat as soon as the swap occurred. She's a great girl and all, but she didn't come here to play like a hero. She's playing to win, and Sarah is going to be hard to beat later down the line. David then says that he's good with both Sarah and Julian going if that's the consensus here. Shelby shrugs and says she's still standing by her thought that Julian needs to go first. Garth and Roland chat in the meantime, and Garth asks Roland if he saw what happened at the puzzle today. Roland says he doesn't know what he's trying to pinpoint specifically, so Garth asks if he saw what Maria was trying to do. Roland once again says he's not catching on to what he is saying, so Garth tells him he is pretty certain Maria threw the puzzle. Roland immediately squints and says absolutely not. There's no way Maria would throw the challenge. Garth tells him he needs to accept the facts here. He's being blinded by love. Roland's jaws drops a bit, and in confessional, Roland calls Garth manipulative as hell. He's talking to him like some therapist figure, talking about how bad of a person Maria is and how she's using emotions to manipulate people. It sounds very delusional from his perspective. Roland then tells Garth he highly doubts Maria threw the challenge. It's not in her to do something extreme like that, especially for no reason. Garth says he personally sees it as someone considered on the outs of this tribe. He knows Maria threw in order for her to save Hannah and Adam from the other tribe. Roland cuts him off and says he feels very gaslit right now, so he'd rather step away from this conversation unless he'd like to hold it with multiple people, including Maria. Garth then tells Roland he'll step away and go talk to other people since he refuses to accept the truth. After learning Garth wants Maria out, Roland joins Maria, Daniela, David, and Shelby, letting them know that Garth is throwing Maria's name around because she apparently threw the challenge. Maria immediately drops her jaw, and Daniela furrows her eyebrows. Shelby asks what made him say Maria threw the challenge, and Roland says Garth talked about how she purposely messed up the puzzle. Maria remains speechless, and David then says Garth has got to go. He's not only on the bottom, but he's actively lying about people to save himself. Roland tells Maria not to worry about it, and Maria says she's not worried. She's just surprised someone would make a bold lie like that. In confessional, Maria says she has no words for Garth right now. He's trying to make her seem like someone she's not, as if she's some sort of villain. It's evident to her he's trying to break apart the majority, but that won't happen. Maria then tells the group that if anything, all of this chaos that's coming up is making them stronger. Shelby agrees and says she's ready to ride this out with this group. Meanwhile, Sarah and Julian sit at camp in silence. In confessional, Julian admits he's a bit worried that he could go home tonight. He's not in a majority anymore, and Garth is attempting to flip the vote onto Maria. He highly doubts it'll happen, but there's no better option right now. Garth then joins Julian and Sarah asks him for an update. Garth sits down and says it's not looking great for them. He tried to get Roland convinced that Maria sabotaged the challenge, but he didn't seem to buy it. Sarah then asks if she should continue claiming Maria through, and Garth says he doesn't know. He's starting to feel like they are cooked tonight. In confessional, Garth says he's worried he messed up by speaking badly about Maria to Roland. It likely set him off, and now everyone else probably knows about the claims against Maria. Sarah then says she's not just gonna have them sit here, away from the other 5 for the rest of this evening. She then gets up and says she's going to go have a chat with those 5. Back with the 5, David says he actually can't stand Garth right now. It's mind-blowing what that guy tried doing to someone super innocent. Daniela hugs Maria, telling her it'll all be okay for her tonight. Sarah then walks up to the group, and David immediately tells her they need time together as a 5. Sarah says she just wanted to know what's up, and David tells her they're having a meeting after a recent event. Sarah then tells them that she truly feels worried for her own safety right now because none of them are splitting up, and she'd like to have chats before tribal council. None of the 5 decide to say anything after that, and Sarah then says she's just gonna leave then if none of them want to talk. After she leaves, Daniela says she feels like they need to vote smart tonight. Sarah is clearly the brains of the snakes, and she clocked it from the day they swapped. Maria says she honestly feels like Garth is the brains of it, and Shelby says she personally still thinks Julian is the best player of the 3. He's playing this game very low-key, and she sees right through the strategy. Daniela says she's just worried about a potential idol play tonight if one of those 3 have the idol. Maybe Garth made such a stupid claim to Roland in order to get the votes onto himself. Roland says it's a good point, so perhaps they should actually reconsider what they are doing tonight and vote either Sarah or Julian. In confessional, Daniela says she knows for a fact Sarah has a lot more sway through her social game, so keeping her around would risk this alliance's potential in the merge. Julian seems like he's a quiet church mouse, and Garth is terrible at this game. In addition, everyone now assumes Garth has an idol, and she feels like that's a very good possibility. Why else would he approach Roland and talk badly about his island girl, Maria? With the 5 still talking, Sarah returns to camp and she tells them she tried to get them to split up but they won't budge. Sarah then sits down and breaks down in tears, telling them she's scared right now. Julian sighs and says he didn't want things to go downhill for them so soon. Their only hope right now is to flip 1 or 2 people to their side at tribal council. In confessional, Sarah says she's prepared for this to be her last night in the game, so she's going to give it all she has at tribal council. If this is truly her last night, she will make the most out of it. She will go down swinging. It's night 12, and Shu arrives to tribal council and sit in their seats. Justin welcomes them to their first tribal council as a new group of 8. He turns to David first, asking him how the last few days have been for this tribe, and David smirks and says he isn't even sure how to describe this tribe anymore. He thought everyone was cool, but the last 2 hours have been extremely hectic. Justin squints and turns to Garth, asking him if he knows how to describe this tribe. Garth breathes out and says it actually feels a bit like prison for him on this tribe. Justin asks him why, and Garth says that he just feels like the 5 Fung people over there have closed their minds, completely ignoring anything he has offered them. Roland then quickly cuts in, explaining to Justin that there's a fair reason for why Fung hasn't spoken with any of the snakes lately. Garth approached him earlier and mentioned Maria's name, calling her a saboteur in the puzzle today. Maria then also jumps in and says she was very hurt when she found out she was being framed as a villain. Garth quickly denies this and says he wasn't purposely making her out to be a villain. He just stated a simple observation he made. Shelby then speaks up and says that there's one other person who could help everyone out here, and that's Sarah. She was the only other person present for the puzzle. Justin then asks Sarah if she wants to tell everyone her perspective, and Sarah says Maria seemed to have mixed puzzle pieces around and randomly putting them in places that did not make sense. Maria's jaw then drops and she says that's not true whatsoever. That's a bold lie. Garth shrugs and says that people will never believe himself and Sarah because Maria presents herself as an innocent little girl who couldn't do any harm. Maria then corrects him and says she's not a little girl, she's a woman. Secondly, she finds it pretty ironic how Sarah is just now bringing all of this up. Sarah then says she actually wanted to have a conversation about it with people, but none of the 5 Fung people split apart, so it was impossible. Roland says that her and Garth could have easily brought it up when they returned to camp, but Garth says he wanted to talk to Sarah alone to confirm he wasn't the only one who saw what Maria was doing. Daniela then speaks up, explaining her point of view on all of this. She's personally confused why Garth and Sarah seem to have 2 different recollections of the situation. Garth has been framing more like it was evident Maria's sabotage, while Sarah's explanation makes it seem like Maria simply wasn't sure what she was doing. Maria then jumps in and says that it was actually Garth who told her not to do anything with the puzzle since Sarah was working on it alone for the most part. Sarah says they all eventually had to go with the puzzle, so she's referring to when it was Maria's turn. Maria tells Sarah she's actually very hurt that she and Garth have been lying 10 toes down, but she gets it now. It's just a game move for them to survive. Justin then asks David how he's processing all of this right now, and David says he's obviously trying to take both sides of the argument here. Unfortunately for the 3 snakes, it's harder to believe a word that comes out of their mouths. Daniela adds that they are called snakes for a reason. Julian then says that he feels like this tribe is not even one single tribe. It's basically 2 different tribes that are merged together. Shu has tried to get in with some of the new Fung members, but none of them have been receptive. Daniela then asks why none of them came up to a Fung member to suggest another snake's name. There's a lot of irony coming from Julian's argument here because they don't want to suggest their own tribe's name, yet they expect the Phoenix originals to flip on each other. Julian says he actually never confirmed his loyalty to anyone here, and she would have known that if she actually had a proper chat with him. Daniela then straight up says she's willing to chat now. She encourages him to say a name right now. Julian then says he's going to vote for Maria tonight. Daniela tells him that's not a snake. That's a phoenix. Sarah then cuts in and says it's getting really ridiculous, but Daniela tells her not to interrupt. She genuinely wants to hear from Julian who he wants to vote out from the snakes tonight. Garth then laughs out loud, calling this whole thing extremely dumb. Roland then comments that the dumbness came from a very rich source. Daniela once again asks Julian to speak up, and Julian remains quiet. Justin then asks if anyone has anything else to add before they vote tonight, and Sarah mentions how people need to think about the long run. Someone here can get extremely far into this game because of how well they have been perceived up to this point. People can't refuse to acknowledge that their competition might actually be those they consider friends. That's all she has to say. Justin then says it's time to vote, so everyone gets ready.
I'll tally the votes. If anyone has a hidden immunity idol and they want to play it, now would be the time to do so. Alright, I'll read the votes. First vote. Maria. Maria. That's 2 votes Maria. Maria. 3 votes Maria. Sarah. 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 We're tied. 3 votes Maria, 3 votes Sarah. Sarah. That's 4 votes Sarah, 3 votes Maria, 1 vote left. Seventh person voted out of Survivor China. Sarah.
Sarah then gets up along with Garth and Julian, and both guys hug her as she prepares to get her torch. Maria then breathes out and Daniela smiles, telling her to relax. Sarah then goes to grab her torch and she places it next to Justin. She watches her torch get snuffed and she starts making her way out. Julian breathes out and Garth shakes his head in annoyance. Justin then tells everyone to go make their way back to camp, so they all start heading out. Next time on Survivor China, with 1 snake down, only 2 remain on the new Shu tribe. As the 5 Phoenix members feel closer than ever, Julian and Garth feel like they are out of options. Meanwhile on Feng, all eyes are on Steph's new bracelet. While Steph tries to play it off as something she always had in her bag, will anyone catch on that something is suspicious? Plus, the discovery of Sarah's vote-off sparks tensions at the challenge mats between the 2 tribes. Be sure to tune in to the next episode. Sarah's final thoughts. Sarah feels pretty devastated going home first in the swap. She was obviously screwed by the swap, going from a great majority to a clear minority. She tried her best to socialize with everyone, but clearly it wasn't enough for them. She's trying to figure out why it was her and not Garth tonight, but she has no idea. Maybe they didn't trust her personal conversations with them. Regardless, she's out now, so it doesn't even matter to her. She hopes Alec or Julian take home the win.